Okay, everyone. I hope you can hear me. Oh, let me add him. Add to stream. Grand Rising. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. It's so good to see you. This is my first live, so I'm not good at this kind of thing.
It's
But
okay.
it's good
Hey,
to
I only
see.
got an hour today, sweetie. We could do another hour this evening if you want to do a part two.
Okay, thank you for telling me that. Okay, let's schedule that off camera. But you know what? First, let me just go ahead and introduce you
Hmm.
to the audience, people who are watching right now. It's only one person. That's okay. This is my first live, but I'm sure we'll have lots of viewers on the replay. A lot of people were sharing the notification.
Yeah, they'll be
So,
coming in.
all right. Um, High vibrations, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Bringing It Home with C.N.Smith. I am your hostess, Christina Nicole Smith. Some of you may know me by my Aboriginal name, Adelohosgi Agatatna'i. I want to take a moment to thank every single person that supports the channel through CashApp. It allows me to continue to bring this important message of homeschooling future generations to the collective. It's truly a blessing, and I'm sending waves of prosperity back in your direction. Also, thank you for liking and sharing our videos. It means so very much to me. Today's guest has been shaking up the internet since 2019 because of the knowledge he has been openly sharing that has been hidden for so long. He is a son, brother, uncle, father, and chief of the Hayes clan that traces their lineage back to the Mississippians. For those of you who will be hearing him for the first time today, trust me, after today, it won't be your last. You'll be looking for him. I present to you the legendary Chief Rod Hayes. Rod Hayes, welcome to the show. It's so good to finally get a chance to meet you.
That's listening to that introduction. I said, I got to meet this guy.
Well, look, I have to edify you, okay? Because you're doing a lot to wake up so many people, and that's including me. I mean, I was already on my journey, but uh, I have learned so much from you since I first started listening to you, especially just making the connection. I know a lot of people say this, but drawing the line, because you always say, look, we just say people need to know what happened, who did it, how it happened. We need to hear the whole thing so we can wake up and just, you know, get things cracking. And people are still kind of lost. They don't know who they are. But anyhow, we're not talking about that today because this is a homeschooling channel, and I know that you are all about the children, and that warms my heart. We're
Can we
together
drop
on
a
that.
few references to start?
Yes,
Okay, so we should all be familiar with Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson.
yes.
There's a book called Boys Will Be Boys, written by a Jewish lady.
Hmm.
I forgot her name. Um,
Translation, translation.
there's also another book we need to read called Dumbing Down of America.
Hmm.
Um, there's another book, Lies My Teacher Told Me.
I've heard of
Um,
that one.
and there's a lady who has a lengthy discourse on No Child Left Behind on YouTube named Charlotte Isertby. Charlotte Isertby was the director of education. She was originally under Bush and Bush and Reagan, and she went on all the way into the No Child Left Behind program. And she was explaining how they was deliberately miseducating the children. So, and how they was not following the protocol, how they supposed to follow it. She goes in.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
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 And education proper um is not done in the school.
No, it's not.
No. School is a Yiddish word. It
Mm-hmm.
comes from the Yiddish word shul, Shool.
Mm-hmm.
You trace the etymology back of the Yiddish word, you get a Hebrew word, Sheol, Sheol. We know Sheol in modern English to translate from the Hebrew to English as hell. So they've been telling us the whole time they've been using our educational system to condition our children to be fodder for hell.
Oh
And
my gosh.
so as we go into the understanding of homeschooling, it takes us back to step down education, which they eliminated in order to institute a Pavlovian response system. So, if you don't know what a Pavlovian response system is, it was discovered by Ivan Pavlov, who was a scientist, and the conditions response was predicated upon the bell, food, and conditioning the dog to respond to the bell. The other part of modern education comes from a guy by the name of B.F. Skinner. B.F. Skinner used operant conditioning by what's known as a Skinner box. We call them a classroom today. Okay. Um, then there is a MK Ultra scholar by the name of Esther Brooks. Dr. Esther Brooks was utilizing um, hypnotic techniques to recondition people, and he became instrumental in the secret agenda of developing a miseducational platform. Okay.
Mm.
Now, comparative analysis grab a modern children's book for a 6-year-old. Compare it to what we used to teach our children, or we used to read as bedtime stories called Aesop's Fables. Many of them were stolen by the brothers Grimm and rewritten as Grimm's Tales. The Grimm's brothers, one of them was a educator, and he developed what's called Grimm's Law Grammar. These is the rules that they use to mistranslate on purpose information at key levels so that the developing mind cannot properly assimilate the information. Another reference is Dianetics by L. Ron Hubbard, because Dianetics explains the mechanism by which they pass this information through whole families by affecting the one that came before them. It's called contagion or aberration. An aberration means departing from that which you know to be normal. Contagion or aberration is when you spread your wrong and rogue ideas to others and they accept it as the reality.
Wow.
And the Dianetics program is designed to interrupt that pattern.
Okay.
Okay, so that's enough references for now. So we can get into yo.
You know what? I had actually heard about that. I did a post about that not too long ago. The MK Ultra. I don't remember if it was the. I know they were doing some. There were some documents that had came out that were declassified on an FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, and they were doing experiments in the 50s, like you said, on dogs.
Yeah.
And yeah, and then a lot of the they were bringing these experimentations to college campuses, but
Mm-hmm.
they had like front groups to lay these things out, and like in the like as a front for like them being educational programs that were bringing but to the college campuses. And this is information that has been declassified, and I actually have a link. And once the replay goes, once I post the replay, I'm going to post a link to those documents in the description. I remember to do that because I have the PDF, the actual PDF, where they were laying out like how they were making dogs do certain things.
Yeah, that's the Pavlovian response.
Okay.
The
Yes.
most critical discovery in the in experiments done is called learned helplessness.
Yeah.
Learned helplessness
Mm.
was discovered by shock treatments on a dog to make him jump from one side of the cage to another. And then they found out that if every side he jumped to, if he continuously got shocked, did he get to a point where he'll just lay there, grin his teeth, and bear it as if there was nothing going on. He's learned to be helpless. He don't even try to escape the punishment anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. So they detail a lot of MK Ultra in a book called Mind Control, World Control. And there's another one called mm, mm, I forget the other name of the book. But the whole thing is that he who controls the education controls the development of the youth. If you control the development of the youth, you in effect have stolen the future from the people.
That is so real. That is so real. And this is why I wanted you on this channel because I know I'm talking about it, but we need the divine masculine in here talking about this too. Men care about their children too. I think there's a misconception on that. There's so many men uh, on this earth, specifically melanated men, that really care about their children. And that's a stereotype, that's a lie, that they don't. I was raised by a very good man, my father. So, and all the men in my family were married. Uh, and I just grew up around a lot of good men. So that's what I know. And
It, it wasn't easy for them to break up our families. If you go back, the woman receiving custody of a child is new. It's not 100 years old in America.
wow.
The breadwinner automatically retained custody because he can financially support the dependents.
Hmm.
So what they
Hmm.
did is they entered a third party into the relationship between them in a marriage between a man and a woman, and that third party is called the state.
Yeah.
So the child got three parents, the mama, the daddy, and the state. The woman got two husbands, her husband and the state. The man got two wives, his wife and the state. Now the state got superior claim because the wife to the husband to the wife, and the parent to the children. So that's giving them total control of the family, right?
Yes.
So when
Yes.
we go to the story of the Christ crucifixion, this is the destruction of the great mother. And when they finally got her crucified, they divide her garments up. And that's the symbol for the family fabric. The nuclear
Mm-hmm.
family, what they call it, the fabric of the family is the royal garment.
Mm-hmm.
And they say that the royal garment was auctioned from the auction block. We know that's how they stole the children and traded them and bartered with them. So they know that if you can control the youth, you can in effect hijack the future. But what they never expected was that some of us wasn't gonna go along with their program even as a baby.
Okay, so look, you've already said a lot of profound things. I'm so grateful. Um, let's talk about. You already dropped a lot of book references as far as how the educational system has been manipulated, and there's books to document what they're doing right now. But
Mm-hmm.
can you talk about some of the things that original people were doing before this compulsory education system got started? Can you go into
So
that a
we
little
had a method called open air education. Their method is called four walls education. Open air education and step down education is our platform. We would use step down education for a reason. The
bit?
children that's in the back of the class, that's the youngest, by the time they get to the front of the class, they correcting the teacher.
Hmm. Yeah.
Nobody don't want the children correcting adults no more.
No.
Stay in your place, shut your mouth, be quiet, be seen, not heard.
Did we get that from the quote unquote oppressor? Because
Right,
I've heard,
right, because in the book it tells
yeah,
you clearly, out of the, I said, wisdom comes from the mouth of babes.
yes, yes.
So if you're gonna cut off the wisdom, we cutting off the ancestral wisdom from the elders and the
Mm,
developing wisdom of the youth, and then we separating the two from each other so they can't get the riffraff out the middle.
mm. Mm.
That's why Big Mama House was so important. You had teachers who was always related to us, aunties,
Yes.
great aunties, grandmama, mama, big sister. Them was our educators. So when the invaders came, the hardest thing for them to do was to get control of education out of the hands of the people. That was harder for them to do than taking our physical gold because of our reverence for our children, because we knew our children were our future.
Mm.
And if you protect the children, you actually, in essence, is protecting the future.
Mm.
But this is all part of the destruction of a matriarchal style of government. Under the matriarchy, children is the first point of protection. Everything is revolving around the children,
Mm-hmm.
not for any other reason than you securing your future. The women surround the children, the men surround the women.
Yes.
And if they get through the men, they won't be in no shape to fight them women. Right? In the matriarchal system, when it comes to the babies, every one of us is the shooter. The whole team is the shooter. Everybody in the team is the shooter. But in this modern system, the parents don't even got a gun. They're using a slingshot to fight a juggernaut by themselves. Some of us come across it incidentally and
Mm-hmm.
figure out what's going on because of the maltreatment of a child or two that we personally know,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, I was going to school when I was in the sixth grade. This was an actual true event. It's documented in my educational record. Some seniors came from the high school to whoop some niggers.
Mm-hmm.
We got kicked out for the rest of the semester. They gave them 3 stage suspension because they said that they needed to graduate. So my mama said, "Well, what about my child? My child needs his education too." They
Right.
say, "Well, he got time to make up for his mistakes. They at the end of their schooling, they need to graduate."
Wow.
Go figure.
Wow. You know what? You said something very interesting, which was children should be seen and not heard. You know, my mother used to say to me, I used to hear her say, well, that's how we were raised. We should be seen and not heard. And so that's
Which is not
quite,
the that was taught to us by the people who hijacked Big Mama House and took her name out and called it the Big House. Turned them into POW camps and told us we lived in slavery. But we got so many of our elders tell us that slavery didn't exist like they told us, and we didn't come from ships.
I would like to share a story, and this is related to my schooling too. I was in fifth grade, and we were told to, number one, it was a majority white school. And there wasn't very many of us so-called black people in the school, and so I was the only one so-called black dot in the class. Okay, and there was an assignment we had to do, and they said, okay, so make a little caricature of the paper, the construction paper out of
Mhm.
yourself, and then on the abdomen part, write where you're from. Okay, and so I was thinking really hard, and I'm like, so I saw everybody writing stuff like, oh, I'm from Germany, I'm from, wherever, Russia, all these different places. And I'm like thinking, because, they teach us, they say, well, this is all immigrants, it's the melting pot. So I'm like, well, where am I from? And I was thinking real hard. And I was like, well, all I know is I'm from here. That's all I know. I'm from here. And so I thought that was being a child in a child's mind. I thought there was something wrong with that. I was like, aren't I supposed to be from somewhere else? and so, and then, the same day they were showing slave videos. So the Africans were, um, partially dressed. The women were topless, right? And they made it, and plus, there's so much connotation with that, but it's hot out there, okay? But they make it seem like that savage if you're partially dressed, and then then you the same day you see the so-called white people, and they have on their refined clothing, and it's this and it's that, and so at recess, they were like, oh, you're a nigger, And oh, you come from that, and your people were slaves and all this. And so I came home and I was crying. I was crying. And my daddy was like, no, we come from kings and queens. We're not that. And I said, Mom, look, were we slaves? Were we slaves? And she said, I don't know nothing about that. My mom said, I don't know nothing about that. And I said, well, where are we from? Where are we from? And she said, well, look, all I know is we're from here. We're from here. You know, on my daddy's side is Texas, and and on my mama's side is Alabama, and that's all I know. I said, but were we slaves? And she said, no, I don't know nothing about that. And so it's interesting that you say this because every time, every person, every so-called melanated person that I've met that was born here has told me, yeah, we've got Indian in the family. And what's his name? Henry Louis Gates would always make jokes about that and say, oh, because your grandma had long hair and she had high cheekbones. You want to say she's, Indian. They make jokes about it. But a lot of us have heard that. Anyhow, I think I'm going off on the side. It's just like I'm preaching to the choir when I talk to you. I just feel like I can say that to
But
you and share that story.
the things that we're talking about, even though they might be common knowledge for me and you got listeners that's just not unraveling the story themselves, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned Henry Louis Gates. Henry Louis Gates he's a gatekeeper.
Ooh.
He is a assistant in the fabrication of the DNA telling you from Africa. He's one of the pioneers of that shit. You can only tell genetic stock from a family line if you have a control to compare it to. They
I've
can't
heard
take
that.
your blood and just go around the world matching it to other blood trying to find you. They can't find you like that. They got to have a control baseline of DNA in order to, or blood, in order to match your typing and origin,
Mm,
right? They
mhm.
don't, like a lot of us don't know that blood typing goes a lot more detailed than they told us it did. But it's just not as descriptive as DNA, right? So Henry Louis Gates is a bourgeoisie Negro.
Okay, so let me just say this, because when you go back generations on your family line, you can't possibly know unless you go into a deep meditative state, which I haven't gone that deep, but you can't possibly know all the, your great grands as you go further back, they multiply, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you can't know every person. Um, what do you think about this? That saying, okay, well, I'm sure because we know that there's been migrations of I guess the Malian Empire. There was one emperor that came
Yeah,
over,
that
like in
was
the
Khan Mansa Musa. He came looking for his brother who had come over here for trade. And
okay, so
his brother got lost.
having said that, we know that there were some people that came, some West Africans that came over,
But
and
that
maybe
wasn't
never,
that wasn't uncommon for us to do trade with West Africa.
and even just to and probably intermarry,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
The
So
royal families of the earth, we know where we at.
mhm,
The earthborn know where the earthborn from.
okay,
So a lot of us intermarry with Africans
yeah,
across the Atlantic before
mhm,
Columbus ever set sail, as
right,
well as Asian and Polynesian on the
mhm,
western side of the land, where the natural barrier, they dug the Panama Canal to break the barrier,
mm,
right? Because you would have to go all the way around South America to sail from um, West Africa to California.
mm.
So in order to eliminate the route around South America, they dug the Panama Canal. So in the modern educational system, they have us believing that the $5 Indians, who they declared Indians by presidential order, guys like Andrew Jackson, Trail of Tears, you know, treaties were signed using $5 Indians as stand-ins for us. We ain't supposed to figure this shit out. But we know our culture is going to be plain in front of our face. Under our culture, we don't sign treaties. That goes against our cultural development for thousands of years. We make agreements and then we make marriage arrangements and trade goods to seal the deal on the agreement. Not that's why they never honored the treaty. They always knew they was fraudulent. And that's what they want to keep us from knowing. As long as we think we
Okay.
came from somewhere else, we won't reclaim our land. If we don't reclaim our land, they declare it abandoned. And then they can execute squatters' rights to claim the land because it's abandoned. And it's abandoned because they told us we came from Africa. But this all goes to the miseducation and the willful intent in the program of the miseducation of our people.
You know what? I want to, and that's facts. You know what? I want to take a moment for you to discuss the Jaffe memo, the 1969 Jaffe memo that was
Part of
put
Planned
out.
Parenthood.
Planned Parenthood, and a lot of people don't know how this so-called organization. It's not just some healthcare organization that's meant for. They say it's meant for, oh, reproductive rights for women. It's not for that, and people
So
don't know how.
Planned Parenthood in the Jaffe document really takes a back seat to the Rockefeller Foundation and the development of modern education in America. They bankrolled the historians that was actually fiction writers. They wrote the story. The story. Okay, so we're talking about schools. This
Right.
whole idea of the slave narrative was developed at Notre Dame University in France. That's why that modern slave ship that they always like to throw up and say we came on slave ships and we packed
I
like
saw,
sardines. That's a
I
perfect
saw that.
overlay for
Yes,
Notre Dame
I saw that.
University.
I saw that when you did the live stream with Young Elder. You put
Yeah.
the top of the Notre Dame cathedral. So for those who are watching, if you do like an overhead, like let's just say you were a bird's
Aerial
eye
view.
view,
Yeah.
an aerial view, thank you, of the Notre Dame cathedral, it looks exactly like that famed image of the slave ship, the so-called slave ship that they were, where people were packed in like sardines. You just look like bodies laying right alongside each other all throughout the ship. If you were to lay those images side by side, this is what our brother is speaking of. It looks like the exact same image.
The
It's
same
amazing.
blueprint.
Yeah.
It's the same blueprint. The blueprint designed for Notre Dame, they have to tell you to put the blueprint together. Where did the miseducation and the slave narrative come from? It was hatched as an academic plan to usurp the land. This was
What year
done
was that?
by the black nobility.
So approximately when did they hatch this plan with the blueprint?
Well,
What do you think?
yeah. So they only okay. So that is a byproduct of the protocols of the wise men of Zion. In there, in the protocols, it tell you to control the education of the goyim. The goyim translate as chattel, and that is the reference that they give to the so-called non-Jews. You gotta be careful about this language, but these people came over here and they called themselves conquistadors, Englishmen, Dutchmen, and Frenchmen, but they look like me and you. And then they changed
A
the
lot of people don't know
narrative.
that. Mhm.
Right. They start what they call whitewashing history by changing the paintings and repainting the paintings into pale faces to take the black nobility out of it. They don't want you to know that they look
So,
like us.
okay, so there was what's the woman's name? Somebody, Gwendolyn, Deborah, Badalora. She wrote a book, something like about how when white people first appeared in history. So before the 1600s, she said there was no such thing as a white person.
It's a
So
whole
is that
lecture
what you're?
it's a
I'm
lecture
saying. Say it again.
on it's a whole lecture on it on YouTube. Matter of fact, this one lecture a lady did, another one a man did, talking about the exact same topic. What we don't know is white people is free white persons in law.
Mm-hmm.
And those characters I named earlier, the Englishman, the Frenchman, the Dutch, the Portuguese, and all of those black nobilities is classified in Europe as white, but they the black nobility, right? They
Okay.
look like us. They classified in law as white. When they came over here, they used the so-called white man to block us out the institutions of finance, the institutions of law, the institutions of learning. We couldn't be educators, right? They had to look like somebody else. They couldn't look like us. We couldn't be bankers. They got to look like, so that's the way that they was able to keep us from the information, right? The first one to notice it was a guy by the name of David Walker, who wrote David Walker's Appeal.
I've
Then,
heard you mention that.
okay, David Walker was writing to the other chiefs across the land in the newspaper his appeal. Like, what the fuck going on with these motherfuckers with this nappy hair and these pale people? He trying to figure out, get to the bottom of it. Well, they didn't know how to translate and decipher the code because they didn't allow us to learn what they taught each other in private, in secret clubs and groups. Remember, we educating our children ourselves at the beginning. The
Right.
children go to Big Mama house and they learn cooking from Big Mama and Aunt Lois. They learn
Right.
sewing from Aunt Betty and Aunt Martha, right?
Mm-hmm.
They learn how,
Yes.
the boys go out, they learn how to shoot guns from Uncle Walter. Uncle Bobby
Yes.
teach them how to gut a cow and skin them,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
We learn all of the stuff
Yep.
at Big Mama house from a different elder,
Right.
right? So Big Mama
Yes.
supervised and overseen that. And that's was our
Uh-huh.
rites of passage program,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Mm-hmm.
the rites of passage was replaced with what we call school. The first thing they did was try to usher you into the church. Once they get you in the church, you're gonna send your child to the church school or Sunday school. So they was getting Sunday school once a week. Sunday school once a week end up being modern educational system set up with control mechanisms in place to train them and make them suitable for the factory and the prisons. The prisons is where you sent the rebellious Negroes, the ones who didn't want to follow they job network program. That's how they perpetuated slavery. Abraham Lincoln, the Proclamation of Emancipation does not mean what they told us it means. The proclamation meaning to tell publicly of the emancipation, which was the transfer of the property right from the individuals no longer allowed to own slaves. Slaves are now citizens, and citizens belong to the nation. So therefore, we translating the slave from private domain to public domain. And now that's how they ensnare the whole nation.
Hmm. Okay. So I want to go back to a little bit about the the legislation or the beginning of the so-called white people in law, because there was no white person 1600s on paper. A lot of people don't realize that a lot of the first uh, Europeans that came over were black. Can you go into that? Were swarthy, because we're hearing that they
Yeah.
were
So they use terms
swarthy,
to
like a lot of the
describe
muster
them that
rolls.
don't
Can you
mean
just?
Yeah, they use terms to describe them that we don't use to describe ourselves today. Like the
Right.
color of me and you would be classified in back then as brunette.
Yeah, I've
If they
heard that
was
term before.
darker,
Yes.
if they was darker than me and you, they would be swarthy. If they were lighter
Yes.
than me and you, they would be taupe or olive.
And a lot of the Irish, Scottish, Germans coming over in the 1600s and the 1700s, they were classified as swarthy. And a lot of people don't know that, especially
Yeah,
what's his name? Benjamin Franklin spoke about that in the 1700s, saying that he was afraid that America would be Germanized, but the Germans were swarthy. And
yeah,
he said that. And a lot of people don't know that. Hmm.
yeah. See, we got this cutout history that they gave us, and if they keep telling
Yeah.
the lie long enough, and enough people believe the lie, they follow that narrative. So we believe that the Germans don't look
Mhm.
like us. They look like the characters Himmler that they show us. Those are actors from Hollywood. The, our
We
history
need to talk
books,
about that
oh,
some. Yeah.
right, our history books over here don't read the same as the ones you get from Europe.
Did you hear about? Hold on. I know. You know what? Just because what you said just made me think about something. Over in Virginia right now, they're supposed to be redoing the curriculum. They're supposed to be updating it, right? Did you hear about this? So on the 17th, November 17th, they have this proposal where they have the mongoloid looking Indians on the
Hmm.
cover, and they say these were America's first immigrants. And so it was this whole uproar, and there was like a hearing, and there was some guy from the Pamunkey tribe saying this is an outrage to suggest that we were the first immigrants. It's like you erase all this history. Yeah, yeah. There's been a lot of history that they're in uproar about this. Have you heard about this? Because they
I'm
don't like it. They're
this.
saying they're from Asia, and they don't like that. They don't like that you're saying that we're from Asia. That's wrong. And I'm like,
That's not wrong.
but how
See,
do
but here's the
exactly
trick.
that's what I'm saying.
The Romans were Etruscans. The
Hmm.
Etruscans were African exiles who settled in Tuscany, which is Italy.
Hmm.
These are people that Hannibal was fighting.
Oh,
So when
oh,
they came to power, they took the power way back in Greece under Alexander. See, the divine right of kings is contingent upon you seizing certain documents that gives you. So it's like a board game. The one who sees the uh caste sutra. The caste sutra
hmm.
is the scroll of government. It's to tell you how to run the government, and it's how they're able to tell you they will have a 6,000 year rule because it was under um Alexander that they infiltrated Greece. When they talk about a Hellenistic society, they're talking about a matriarchy. Greece was a matriarch, and Helen was a female. When the Romans took power, they turned Helen into a man, right? So this is what you
Wow.
call the attack of the rogue patriarchs. The education is designed to veil these key points of history, events, and transitions. Because if you don't see them, you won't never know it's there. You can't do nothing about it.
You know what's interesting? This whole time, how they've been able to keep this lie going, and it seems like it just ties back in because if the children, if the children are the lie, then when they grow up and they don't know anything different, they just keep perpetuating that. And
That's what it said.
it's
Contagion
so
aberration.
ingrained.
That's the contagion aberration I was talking about from Dianetics. Explains it to it so clearly.
Uh-huh.
Right. The same with miseducation
I
of the
want to.
Negro. We got educators like Nathan and Julia Hare. Awesome.
Hmm.
There's a sister, her last name Bush. When you look her up, they call it the other Bush family. And all her children is graduating college at
Oh,
12 and 13
I've,
years old.
I've heard of. I've heard of her. I've heard of her.
Right.
Yes.
Then you got
Yes. Yes.
other psychiatrists and developmental psychologists like Dr. Amos N. Wilson, who broke down the developmental awakening the natural genius of the black child, the psychological development of the black child, awakening the natural genius of the black child. And Amos Wilson, when you get that understanding the concepts of how the education worked, then you see why they don't like for us to go beyond our field of study asking questions. You can't, if you can't keep it compartmentalized, you can't keep it contained, right?
Mm.
So this is what they was banking on. And this is why they set up so many points of contention as a divide and conquer strategy and doctrine of oppression. It's up to us at this point. We know what happened. We know who did it. We know where they came from. We know how they did it. We know the psychological tactics, the military tactics, the political tactics. We know the economic strategies, the redlining, and all of that. We know now.
Mhm.
Now, for us to only have to do one thing is too much for us. We can't do it. Because we so filled with the lie, we don't believe that we was already here. We believe a lie. We everything but what was already here. We didn't have the Bible over here before 1492.
Wow.
And if you get the Panapi Bible, you'll see how it changed in order to suit the circumstances, in order to capture the minds of the people that's reading it. In the Panapi Bible, which is the most recent translation, it say the Panapi killed Jesus.
I've never heard this term before. Panapi? Who was that?
That's a native tribe that didn't accept the Bible. So they had to keep rewriting it, and
Oh.
until they got it, until they told the story in a way that the Panapi felt guilty enough to repent to their biblical God and live Yahweh
Wow.
for killing Jesus. But Jesus is ISIS. That's how every time somebody come out with the beard and shit looking like Caesar Borgia, they know he not Jesus because they know that Jesus is ISIS and ISIS is a woman, so they automatically know he a fraud. But if you don't know how to, if you never studied the translating of the Bible, you would never came across the Greek. The Greek, there is no J before 500 years ago. But nobody is rationalizing the 1,500-year difference between the person and the name. Then in the same book to tell you that the power is in the name of Jesus. But that ain't the right name because the J is 500 years old. If you go to the Greek, where it came from, under King James, who was a blackamoor. He was a blackamoor. He was a black nobility from Europe.
Okay.
Right? And he was a part-time cross-dresser, and he was a boy lover, that's what they call homosexuals back then, boy lovers. And so he created the letter J to give you a fish hook. Because they said the Christ in the book say, I'm gonna make you fisher of men. You can't
Yeah.
fish without a hook.
Correct.
unless you use a net. But they already told you at the crucifixion they ripped up the garment and auctioned it off in parts off the auction block. The family members.
Which is the family of the family, yeah.
So now you got to use each piece as a bait to separate the wheat from the chaff. So what they not telling us, IESOUS is the Greek spelling for Jesus. Now using the rules of grammar. I didn't write the rules of grammar. When I was born, they was already using the rules of grammar. The Grimm's Law Grammar for translation and transliteration from one language to another was written before I was born. So when you apply the rules of grammar and you break the word ISIS or you add the translation keys to it, I silences the E, but it makes the I a hard I. And it makes the S a lowercase s, which is a sound as a carry. And then OU becomes a single word because two vowels together has to be pronounced as a single vowel. The O to U make the sound, followed by another vowel that's lowercase s. ISIS. It's the only way to pronounce it.
You know what? I would like to, since we did mention the Jaffe memo, I think I want to share. I'm going to share my screen really quickly, bring it up, because I think people would be surprised to see what was actually written in this, how some of the things that were written in this are being carried out today. Because a lot of people don't understand, if they keep their children in the school system right now, these are plans that these people had that they wanted to implement. And they're actually carrying them out today. This is why you see what you see today.
100%
So I'm
applying those things to the process. Yes. Yeah.
So I'm gonna share. Okay. Oops. Wait. Oh, okay. Hold on. Okay. So I'm gonna. And can you all see that? Oh, can you see it? Can you see it right there?
I could see it, but it was too small to read. The print, I could see it, but I can't. I personally can't read
it. Okay. I'm gonna go to Cinema Link. Can't do anything. Oop, there. Now, it's supposed to be, can you see it now? I'm gonna go here. Now, can you see it better?
I just see me and you now.
Okay. Oh God. Okay. Because I'm trying to share this on the
Okay,
screen.
I can
You said it's
see
too
it.
small.
If you
I'm sorry,
read it,
y'all.
the
This is my first
document is there.
time doing this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because you could
So
probably read it.
but it's on the screen now. It's on the screen.
It's on the screen.
Okay. Okay. So basically, this is the 1969 Jaffe memo, and it says at the top, proposed measures to reduce fertility by universality or selectivity of impact in the United States. And there's, let's see, one, two, three, four columns, and there's information in four columns here on this document. And the first one, starting at the left, is the universal impact and the social constraints that they want to implement. And the first thing it says is they want to restructure the family to A, postpone or avoid marriage, or B, alter the image of the ideal family. They say, look, here's another social constraint. Let's institute compulsory education of children. Let's encourage increased homosexuality. Let's educate for family plantation. Fertility control. Agents in the water supply encourage women to work. Then in the second column, there are the economic deterrents and incentives. And they say, hey, let's modify tax policies. And let's give substantial marriage tax, child tax. Let's tax married more than single. Let's do additional taxes on parents with more than one or two children in school. Let's reduce or eliminate paid maternity leave or benefits. Let's reduce or eliminate children's or family allowances. So they do a lot of things. They have housing policies. They confine childbearing to only a limited number of adults. Um, the other social controls they want to implement is the compulsory abortion of out of wedlock pregnancies, compulsory sterilization of all who have two children, except for a few who would be allowed three. And they also have, in this memo, they also say, let's give payments to encourage sterilization, payments to encourage contraception, payments to encourage abortion, abortion and sterilization on demand, allow harmless contraceptives to be distributed non-medically, and let's make contraceptive truly available and accessible. And so this is part of the memo, and I can include a link to this in the description. I'm going to come back to the screen here. Okay. And I just wanted to share that. And do you have any comments on this? Because I'm the stuff that I said in there, people can see that this is stuff that they're carrying out today.
Those are all Planned Parenthood incentives, and they're using it and applying it to the educational system. But where does it come from? That document and those protocols are borrowed from the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. There was a population control agenda that was implemented in China using the same Planned Parenthood. All of that is eugenics. Eugenics is a Sumerian domain of a guy named Enki. Eugenics was used to identify repeating birth defects thousands of years ago to eliminate them from the genome. And they used the same principles, but then they infiltrated Enki's eugenics and turned it into what we have today as modern eugenics, Planned Parenthood, and Joseph Mengelé's experiments on social development of certain key groups of people. So they started using it to isolate and to try to get rid of certain key groups of people. Then we them key groups of people. But for some reason, the harder they try to exterminate us, the more we reproduce. Our daughters start having children at earlier ages. Our sons start becoming men at earlier ages, right? So now you have 11, 12, and 13-year-olds taking care of the family and having children and starting families, and shit, they got kids in middle school by the time they turn 20. So all of those are social engineering control mechanisms. And they were designed to dumb us down so they can genetically assault us.
I just want to say this, and I know we're coming up on the time you have to get ready to go, but I just want to say this in that I know this information may be coming out to a flood for some, and while these things were implemented, we don't have to let them control us. We're talking about this so people can become aware, and then they can make new choices based on the information they now have. Because when you know better, you can do better. You can choose different things. You don't have to stay in certain situations. And change can be scary, the first to admit that, but we can all do it anyway. It's just change, and we can go through and we can make it to the other side. don't know if there's any questions. I'm looking in the chat. I'm just going to allow a few seconds. If there's questions, I'll give a few
So while
moments.
you're
If
looking
anybody
for the
wants to
questions,
ask or guess the question.
mhm, while you're looking for the questions, we have to understand the importance of educating our own children. Stop letting your enemy
Yes.
educate your children. The part of the educational
Yes.
system that I have not talked about that's probably the most critical. They watch our children go to school and they mark them. They mark them for being child sex trafficked. They auction them off before they ever take them. They've been caught
What?
doing this repeatedly. And there's no sense in calling Child Protective Services for any assistance or help because they are the key and instrumental group who's inside the school trafficking our children. This is more important than the education part. Because if we letting them miseducate our children, and then we have groups like Child Protective Services that's weeding through their medical records in the school system, reading through their personality profiles, who's going to be compliant, who's most likely to submit to this repetitive rape campaign that they own. They've been raping us from the beginning, and they're not going to stop if we don't stop them. And the only way we can stop them is to secure our children away from them. We have to separate from these people. They don't mean us no good. And they hide right in our communities talking about kill whitey. But they the ones behind the dirt. So it is very urgent for us to understand what else they use the schools for. Right? when you know what they're using it for, they got specialized and trained trafficking spotters is what they call work as teachers.
What?
And this is why all these
Oh my.
teachers is getting caught up in these sex scandals with these children. They spotters. They come into the school masquerading as a
Oh my
teacher,
God.
and they are experienced and trained in profiling your child as a child psychological um, um, overseer. They've been trained to come in our schools and take our children, but they pluck them one by one, so it's not enough of us to raise the stink at one time. And so they got them
Oh my
marked. At what
God.
age is they gonna take your daughter, your son, right? And a lot of them, they even got children that's raised as catchers. The catchers are raised, taught how to go and secure another victim. This shit didn't never stop. They just got more sophisticated in the method. 800,000 children, regardless of skin color, come up missing in this country every year. That's too
I
consistent
knew
of a
that.
number. Every
I didn't know
year.
that they were Oh my God. And you know
So
what?
they want to know the remedy is to formulate mother alliances. Y'all don't know how important that is to protect the children. Some of the women are doing it just by the nature of taking their children to school, being a certain type of mother. They creating this whole network of mothers that know how to watch the children, and the ones who don't participate losing their babies.
Wow.
So we need to be aware
Yeah.
that homeschooling is more than just an educational thing. It's a community safety net.
Yes. I'm so glad you said that. Thank you for saying that because I knew I've been sounding the alarm for a long time. I've been homeschooling my children since 2005. And so I've been doing this a while. And back then I was crazy because the social aspect, they wouldn't get socialized. But I'm like, you know what? I'd rather have my children right next to me, so I know what's going on and I can control who they're around and things like this. And it's so
We
important for their own safety and their emotional develop health, their mental health too. You can't have them around these crazy folks when they're so
it's
impressionable and little, soak up everything.
That's why the mothers form groups, because the children get to socialize and develop socially, because the mothers are spending time with them hands on when they taking them with their children somewhere skating. You know what I'm
Yes,
saying? To the park.
yes,
You know, they spending
yes,
time with them,
yes,
right?
yes,
Playing games with them at slumber parties. They're getting social skills. The
yes, they
mother
are.
network
Yes, they
is
are.
critical.
Yes, and we're gonna have to, because it's 10:01, and I don't want to keep you, respect your time.
Hmm.
So I would like to come back, and I do. Let's focus on that part right there, on sounding the alarm as far as the children, because I'm all about that. And I didn't know that they were using the schools to do that. I knew it was bad. They were doing all this indoctrination and this crazy sex stuff they're trying to teach the kids. So I knew that, and they were lying to our children. But I
Hmm.
didn't know that they were doing that. And I knew CPS was that,
Steady
but I didn't know
kidnap
they were.
fans.
They had, I didn't know. I
Steady,
didn't know that. I
yeah.
didn't,
Steady
and that's
kidnap
serious. And
fans. You got to
that's
study the
serious. That
kidnap
is so
fans. We'll
serious.
go more into that on the next part too. But that's
Okay, and
critical.
I
It's
really
very
appreciate
urgent
you.
to get that message out. Yes.
Yes, you're right. Okay, so I'm gonna schedule with you, and I want to thank you all for joining us. I see we don't have any questions, but I want to thank you all for joining us. See you next time on Bringing It Home with C.N.Smith.